When a billionaire's wife mocked a tired black nurse for being too slow, she didn't know that the nurse's husband was the surgeon about to save her own son's life. But when the doctor walked in, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "Ma'am, that's my wife," the entire hospital went silent. What happened next left everyone in tears. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, from which country are you watching this story? And if you love emotional, life-changing stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and join our growing family of kind hearts around the world. The digital clock above the ICU door blinked 12:47 a.m. The hospital was silent except for the distant hum of machines and the faint echo of hurried footsteps. In the private VIP wing, Victoria Hemsley, wife of billionaire industrialist Charles Hemsley, paced restlessly in her high heels. Her 8-year-old son Ethan lay inside the ICU, unconscious after a terrible car accident earlier that night. Victoria's designer gown was slightly torn from the chaos, her makeup smeared, but her arrogance stood untouched. The nurses had been moving in and out of the room, updating monitors, adjusting drips, and whispering medical terms that made no sense to her. Then came Nurse Amara Williams, calm, graceful, her dark skin glowing softly under the fluorescent lights. She carried herself with quiet strength, the kind that came from years of experience and compassion. "Mrs. Hemsley," she said softly, "your son is stable for now, but we need to monitor his pulse closely. The doctor is on his way." Victoria turned sharply, eyes flashing. "Stable? For now? What does that even mean? You're just a nurse. Get the doctor. I don't want updates from assistants." Amara inhaled deeply, steadying her voice. "Ma'am, the surgeon has been called in. He'll be here any minute. I just need you to stay calm for Ethan's sake." But calm was the last thing Victoria could manage. She scoffed, crossing her arms. "Calm? My son is in there fighting for his life, and you're strolling around like it's a tea party. You people are always so slow." The words sliced through the hallway. A younger nurse standing nearby froze, eyes darting nervously to Amara. Amara's jaw tightened, but her tone remained gentle. "I understand you're worried, ma'am, but we're all doing our best." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Your best? My husband donates millions to this hospital every year. I expect competence, not excuses. Maybe if you focused less on chatting and more on doing your job, things would move faster." Amara swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She'd heard words like these before, sharp, condescending, cruel. But this one hurt differently. Not because of the insult, but because of the child lying inside, innocent, unaware of the ugliness outside his room. She straightened her shoulders. "Ma'am, I assure you, every second counts, and we're not wasting any." Victoria turned away, muttering under her breath, "Unbelievable, can't even hire decent staff anymore." The hallway went quiet. The machines beeped rhythmically, the only sound cutting through the thick air. Moments later, Charles Hemsley arrived, his tie undone, eyes red from crying. He looked at his wife, frustration and sadness etched across his face. "Victoria, please," he murmured. "Don't make this harder. Let them work." She ignored him. "I want the chief surgeon, Charles, not some intern, not some random doctor. The best. If we have to pay more, we will." Charles rubbed his temples. "They already called him Dr. Williams. He's one of the best neurosurgeons in the city." Victoria snapped. "Then where is he? My son doesn't have all night." Amara quietly continued preparing the operation room, adjusting instruments, sanitizing trays, every move professional, precise. Her hands didn't shake, though her heart ached. Another nurse whispered softly to her. "You okay?" Amara smiled faintly. "I've been called worse. Let's just save her boy." The emergency phone buzzed. The nurse picked it up, nodded, and said quickly, "Dr. Williams is on his way. ETA 5 minutes." Amara exhaled, a small wave of relief. "Thank God," she whispered. She walked back to Ethan's bed, checking his vitals one more time. The boy's face was pale, his tiny hand cold. Amara brushed his hair gently off his forehead. "Hang in there, little one," she murmured. Behind her, Victoria glared. "Don't touch him unless it's necessary. Where's your supervisor?" Amara turned, keeping her composure. "Ma'am, I'm your son's assigned senior nurse tonight." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Senior? How? You can't even answer basic questions." Amara sighed softly. "I'm sorry you feel that way, ma'am, but my focus is on your son's recovery." Her voice didn't waver, but her eyes showed something deep and unshakable. Dignity. Moments later, the double doors burst open and a tall man in surgical scrubs rushed in, his expression firm yet calm. "Dr. David Williams, prepare." "For immediate evaluation," he ordered. "Nurse Amara, status report." Amara moved beside him instantly, briefing him clearly. Vitals, injuries, current medication. Their communication was smooth, practiced, almost wordless. Victoria folded her arms and sighed dramatically. "Finally, someone competent has arrived." She didn't notice the subtle glance David gave Amara, a look filled with quiet recognition, love, and respect. The hospital staff moved quickly, prepping Ethan for surgery. David placed a reassuring hand on Victoria's shoulder. "We'll do everything we can to save him. Please wait outside." For the first time that night, Victoria nodded silently. As the surgical doors closed, she muttered under her breath, "Let's hope this one actually knows what he's doing." Through the small glass window, Amara could be seen assisting, her movements graceful and sure. Victoria stood there, unaware that the woman she had mocked, insulted, and humiliated was the wife of the man performing the surgery that could save her son's life. And within a few hours, that truth would change everything. The red light above the operating room blinked to life. Surgery in progress. Outside the glass doors, Victoria sat rigidly on a leather bench, her arms crossed, tapping her heel impatiently. Charles sat beside her, head in his hands. Inside, a team of nurses and doctors moved in a synchronized rhythm, controlled chaos. Every second mattered. At the center of it all stood Dr. David Williams, his eyes focused, voice calm and commanding. Beside him was Nurse Amara, mask covering. Half her face, but her steady eyes revealed a quiet confidence. "Heart rate stabilizing, doctor," she said, adjusting the IV line. David nodded. "Good. We'll begin cranial decompression in 30 seconds. Prepare suction and saline." Her hands moved swiftly. No hesitation, no wasted motion. Despite the tension, there was a grace in the way she worked, as if every movement came from both training and compassion. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Victoria kept pacing. "This is taking too long," she muttered. "What are they even doing in there? It's been 40 minutes already." Charles tried to calm her. "Victoria, please. He's one of the best surgeons in the city. Let him do his job." She shook her head. "If something happens to Ethan..." Her voice broke slightly, but her pride quickly masked it. "I'll make sure this entire hospital regrets it," she finished coldly. Back inside, the atmosphere was intense but steady. David's voice cut through the room. "Scalpel!" Amara handed it over instantly, her gloved hand steady. "Bleeding minimal." "Good work," he murmured. Their coordination was seamless. Other nurses exchanged glances. Everyone knew Dr. Williams and Nurse Amara had a special professional chemistry. They worked like a team that didn't need words, as if they shared a language of trust and instinct. But no one in the room except them knew why. David stole a half-second glance at Amara, admiration flickering behind his surgical mask. In that brief moment, he wasn't just looking at a colleague. He was looking at his wife, his partner in every sense of the word. He remembered the nights she stayed up studying with him during med school, the sacrifices she made when she paused her own career to raise their daughter, the strength she carried every single day without demanding recognition. And now, here she was, saving the child of the woman who had just humiliated her. BP dropping slightly, Amara said, quickly, pulling him back to the present. Okay, increase fluids, 200 cc. Let's stabilize before we close. Yes, doctor, she replied, her voice calm and precise. Minutes turned into hours. Sweat gathered beneath their masks, but no one slowed down. At last, David exhaled deeply. We're done. Close him up. We did it. The room filled with quiet relief. A nurse smiled behind her mask. Amara adjusted Ethan's monitor one last time. His pulse was steady, breathing smooth. She finally allowed herself a small, tired smile. David looked at her for a moment, eyes soft. Well done, he said quietly. She nodded. You too, doctor. He almost wanted to say something more, something personal. But this wasn't the place. Not yet. Outside, the door opened and Charles stood immediately. How is he? He asked anxiously. David removed his gloves, his voice calm but reassuring. Your son's surgery was successful. He's going to be fine. We'll keep him under observation for the next 24 hours. Charles's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much. Victoria let out a trembling breath of relief, the first genuine emotion she had shown all night. Oh, thank God, she whispered, then looked at David and smiled faintly. You're a miracle worker. David gave a polite nod. It wasn't just me, Mrs. Hemsley. I had an excellent team. She waved dismissively. Well, sure, but you were the one leading it. That's what matters. Behind him, Amara stepped, out quietly, exhausted, still holding the clipboard. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. Her again? She muttered under her breath. Always standing around doing nothing? Charles frowned. Victoria! But she ignored him and continued, louder this time. You can go now, nurse. I'd rather speak to someone who actually knows what's going on. Amara hesitated, eyes flicking to David, but she said nothing. She simply nodded and turned to leave. David's jaw tightened. He'd seen Victoria's arrogance before, but seeing it directed at his wife stirred something deep in him. He wanted to say something then and there, but he stayed silent. For now. The timing wasn't right. Instead, he looked at Charles and said, Your son's condition is stable. We'll update you once he wakes up. Victoria smiled sweetly, pretending nothing had happened. Of course, doctor. Thank you again. As Amara disappeared down the hallway, her tired footsteps echoing softly, David's eyes followed her. He knew she would never tell anyone what happened, never complain, never seek sympathy. Because that's who she was. But the moment was coming, sooner than Victoria imagined, when her cruel words would come back to her. And when they did, the entire hospital would fall silent. The early morning light filtered through the tall hospital windows, painting the corridor in a soft golden hue. The red surgery in progress sign finally turned off. The long night was over. Ethan's surgery had been successful. He was now resting peacefully in the recovery room. When Dr. David Williams stepped out of the operating theater, removing his mask, the staff instinctively straightened. Respect followed him like a shadow. Behind him, Nurse Amara emerged quietly, exhaustion written on her face but dignity still intact. Victoria and Charles Hemsley rushed forward. Doctor, Victoria exclaimed, clasping her hands together. How is my son? David gave a calm, professional smile. He's stable. The surgery went smoothly. He'll wake up in a few hours. Tears welled up in Victoria's eyes. For the first time that night, she looked genuinely relieved. Thank God. You saved his life, Doctor. You have no idea what that means to me. Charles extended his hand. We're deeply grateful, Dr. Williams. If there's anything we can do... David nodded. Just make sure he gets some rest. That's all I ask. But before he could continue, Amara approached quietly, carrying the final medical report. Dr. Williams, here are the post-op vitals and medication chart for Ethan. David took it from her and gave a small, appreciative smile. Thank you, Nurse Amara. Victoria's expression shifted the instant she saw her. Her eyes narrowed, the softness replaced by cold disdain. Oh. You again? She muttered under her breath, loud enough for everyone to hear. Still hanging around? I thought your part was done. Amara hesitated for a brief second, but remained polite. Just finishing the documentation, ma'am, Victoria scoffed. Documentation? Right. Well, thank you for whatever it is you did. I'm sure the real work was done by the doctor here. The hallway fell silent. Nurses exchanged uncomfortable glances. Even Charles looked at his wife, embarrassed. Amara gave a small nod. I was just doing my job, ma'am. She turned to leave. But David stopped her. His face had changed, calm but firm. There was a flicker of controlled anger in his voice as he spoke. Mrs. Hemsley, he said slowly, his eyes steady. I think you owe this nurse an apology. Victoria blinked, confused. An apology? For what? For the way you spoke to her tonight, he replied. You accused her of being slow, unprofessional, and careless, when in reality she was the one who kept your son alive long enough for me to operate. Victoria frowned, defensive. I didn't mean it like that. I was just upset. David interrupted quietly but firmly, his tone cutting through the hallway like a blade. You were cruel, and you were wrong. Her lips parted in surprise. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. David took a step closer, then looked at Amara, his voice softening. You see, Mrs. Hemsley, this woman isn't just a nurse. She's the reason I'm able to do what I do. She's my strength, my heart. He turned back to Victoria. And she's my wife. The words echoed down the hall like a thunderclap. Every nurse froze. A young intern gasped. Charles's eyes widened in disbelief. Victoria's face drained of color. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. Amara stood still, eyes lowered. Not out of shame, but out of quiet grace. David continued, his voice calm but filled with emotion. Before you judge someone by the color of their skin or their uniform, remember, you have no idea who they are or what they've done for others. Tonight, this woman saved your child. The least you could give her is respect. The silence that followed was heavy, powerful. Even the steady beeping of monitors down the hall seemed to fade. Victoria finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know. David shook his head. You didn't care to know. Then, without another word, he turned and walked down the corridor, Amara beside him, her head held high. Behind them, Victoria stood frozen, guilt washing over her like a wave she couldn't escape. The woman she had mocked was the one who had stood beside her son when she couldn't. And that truth hurt more than anything she had ever felt. The morning sun poured gently into Ethan's recovery room, casting soft golden rays over the small boy sleeping peacefully. The hum of machines was no longer harsh, but steady, reassuring, a heartbeat of hope after the long, grueling night. Victoria. Hemsley sat in the corner, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She stared at her son's small, fragile form, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest filling the room with a calm she hadn't felt all night. Her pride, once as unyielding as steel, now felt like a heavy, suffocating cloak pressing down on her. Her mind raced, replaying every cruel word she had thrown at Nurse Amara. Slow, incompetent, uneducated. The accusations now sounded hollow, empty, even pathetic, echoing in her mind. She swallowed hard, guilt twisting like a knife in her stomach. Charles noticed her silence and approached cautiously. "Victoria, are you okay?" he asked gently. Victoria shook her head. "No, Charles. I was wrong. I was cruel. I mocked her, insulted her, and for what?" She looked toward the door, where Amara had just exited after updating Ethan's charts. "She's the one who kept our son alive, and I treated her like she was nothing." Charles remained silent, sensing that words alone couldn't undo the damage. Victoria rose slowly and stepped out into the hallway. She spotted Amara walking down the corridor, her back straight, her movements calm yet elegant despite exhaustion. Gathering all the humility she could muster, Victoria approached her. "Excuse me," she began, her voice trembling. "Nurse, Amara, I want to apologize. I was horrible to you last night. I let my fear and panic take over, and I said things that no one should ever say to anyone." Amara paused, turning to face her. There was no bitterness in her eyes, only a quiet, compassionate calm. "You don't need to apologize to me, ma'am," she said softly. "The important thing is that your son is safe. That's all that matters." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She had never felt so small, so humbled, so aware of the power of kindness and grace. I've never been treated like this," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "With such patience and dignity. I was blind, thinking only of myself." Amara nodded, a gentle smile playing at her lips. "Sometimes life teaches lessons the hard way. You just have to be willing to learn from them." Victoria glanced back at Ethan, who was slowly stirring. His small eyes opened, wide and innocent. "Mommy," he murmured, reaching out his hand. Victoria knelt beside him, taking his tiny hand in hers. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm here. You're safe now." Ethan looked past her toward Amara, who was standing at the foot of the bed. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice still weak, "for staying with me." Amara's eyes softened. "You don't need to thank me, Ethan. I'm happy to see you awake and safe." Victoria watched the exchange, her heart aching. The woman she had scorned, the one she had belittled moments ago, had shown nothing but compassion. Her pride crumbled completely. Later that day, Victoria returned to the nurses' station. The hallways were alive with the quiet rhythm of hospital life. The soft beeping of monitors, nurses moving between rooms, doctors consulting charts. She handed a small envelope to the head nurse. "This is for all of you, for the care, patience, and dedication you show every single day," she said, her voice sincere. "Especially for Nurse Amara. I was wrong, and I want to show my gratitude." The staff looked at her with surprise. Some raised eyebrows, others smiled gently, sensing her genuine remorse. Amara approached her quietly, taking the envelope. She looked into Victoria's eyes, searching for authenticity. When she saw it, she simply nodded. "Thank you, ma'am. That means a lot." Victoria bowed her head slightly, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I'll never forget tonight. I hope I can be better, not just for my son, but for everyone I meet." Amara's smile was calm, peaceful. "Kindness is something you can always choose, Mrs. Hemsley. It's never too late to start." For the first time, Victoria truly understood. Humility, respect, and compassion were more valuable than money, status, or influence. And the lesson had been taught in the hardest, most unforgettable way possible. As she walked back to Ethan's side, Victoria whispered softly. "I'm sorry. Truly. I'll never forget your grace." Outside, the sun shone brighter, warming the hospital courtyard. A new day had begun. For Ethan, for Amara, and even for Victoria, whose heart was slowly learning the power of humility and gratitude. And in that quiet, golden morning light, the world seemed just a little kinder, because a lesson had been learned and a life had been saved. Weeks passed since that fateful night, and Ethan had fully recovered. His laughter once again filled the Hemsley mansion, a sound that had been absent for far too long. Victoria watched him play in the garden, her heart heavy with the memory of her own arrogance and cruelty. She had changed. The cold, prideful woman who had mocked Nurse Amara was gone. In her place stood someone humbled by the realization that respect, gratitude, and kindness mattered far more than wealth or status. One afternoon, Victoria returned to the hospital, this time not as a demanding VIP, but as a mother who wanted to make amends. She carried a check addressed to the hospital nurses' fund, labeled clearly, "For the nurses who heal hearts." The nurses gathered in the small conference room, murmuring among themselves in surprise. And there, at the front, stood Amara, her posture calm but proud. Victoria approached her slowly, bowing her head. "Amara, I want to apologize again, not just in words but in action. You and your colleagues dedicate your lives to saving others, and I treated you with disrespect. I hope this helps in some small way to show my gratitude." Amara's expression softened. "Thank you, ma'am. The best reward for us is seeing our patients recover. But your gesture will help many others, and that's always appreciated." David stood beside her, watching the scene unfold with quiet pride. He reached out and held Amara's hand gently. Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of everything they had endured together and the life they had saved that night. Victoria then turned to address the room. Her voice, once sharp and commanding, was now calm, sincere, and full of humility. "I've learned a lesson I'll never forget. No matter how much money or influence we have, it can never replace compassion, patience, and respect. We all bleed the same. We all hurt the same. And we all deserve kindness. Always. To all the nurses and staff here, thank you for saving lives, for showing grace under pressure, and for teaching me personally the value of humility. I will never take that for granted again." The nurses smiled, some wiping away tears. Amara's eyes glistened, but her smile was calm, proud, not triumphant. Outside, Ethan ran into Amara's arms, laughing as she lifted him high into the air. David watched, smiling, as the boy's joy radiated throughout the garden. The family stood together, the real heroes of the night, connected by love, courage, and respect. As the camera pans out, or in your video narration, as the voice softens, you leave the audience with a final emotional line. Sometimes life teaches us lessons in the hardest ways, and sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who save us and teach us what it truly means to have a heart. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more emotional, life-changing stories. Share your thoughts in the comments. What lesson did you learn from this story? Your story might inspire someone else too.